I do want to transition to one other part of this. So Elizabeth Warren was asked recently about Bernie Sanders supporters' comments online, and here's how she responded to those concerns.
So when Culinary 226 did come out and criticize Bernie Sanders for Medicare-for-all, his supporters really attacked them. Do you feel, and you're someone who's actually come under that attack before, back in Iowa, back in January, do you feel like he's done enough to condemn the culture online that stems from his movement?
I've said before that we are all responsible for what our supporters do. And I think Bernie has a lot of questions to answer here. And I am particularly worried about what happened in the attacks on members of the Culinary Union, particularly on the women in leadership. The whole notion of publishing their personal addresses, their phone numbers, and then making very aggressive threats against their own safety and the safety of their families. That is not how we build an inclusive Democratic Party, and it is not how we build Donald Trump. We do not build on a foundation of hate.
Okay, so I can't say for sure, but it certainly sounds like she was implying at the end that Bernie Sanders is building on a foundation of hate. And at the very least, she agrees with Bloomberg and Biden that if these people online who have never met Bernie Sanders, he has no affiliation with them, if they say something bad, that it is Bernie Sanders who should answer for that. That's what Elizabeth Warren just said.
Yeah, that's a dangerous precedent. And just to show how ludicrous it is, before I joined you, I was on Twitter and I saw Glenn Greenwald sharing some of the messages and tweets that he's received from Elizabeth Warren supporters when he was facing the threat of imprisonment in Brazil at the hands of a fascist dictator. There were Elizabeth Warren supporters who didn't like Glenn's stance on the Russia investigation, saying they hope he rots in jail. So by Elizabeth Warren's own standards, she is now on the hook for that. So she needs to come out and condemn that. And of course, that is a ludicrous proposition. And that's what Glenn was trying to get to, because it's really not on her to point that out. Just like it's not on Bernie Sanders to point out Leon Thotsky 42069 with 15 followers tweeting at the Culinary Union. It's a ludicrous proposition, but for instances like, Warren's campaign is struggling. And it's kind of sad that now she's resorting to trying to kneecap Sanders just to try to stay afloat. So we're seeing desperation because they don't really have anything to hit him on substance. So they're trying this kind of like wacky Bernie bro conspiracies and this whole narrative.
And I want to say, like, I guess as like the starkest comparison, this is something that I mentioned on the main show yesterday. I couldn't tell you how many tweets I've received, you've probably received from like red hat wearing MAGA heads over the past few years that are just vicious. I've muted all of them, I don't see as many anymore, but they're certainly out there. I don't think in the literally hundreds of hours I've spent criticizing Donald Trump over the past 3 years, I don't think I've ever asked for him to answer for what his people, like, and he deliberately tries to get them to do this stuff to stoke the anger, and I still don't think that he's responsible for it. I think he's responsible for what he tweets or retweets, and it's usually abhorrent. I would never expect even him to be able to control his own cult members, let alone Bernie Sanders to control maybe some of his supporters, maybe convenient accounts that have been set up by supporters of other candidates that want to make Bernie Sanders look bad.
Yeah, there's nothing stopping anybody from creating fake accounts and just going on and harassing people, pretending to be a supporter of somebody else. And one thing I do want to point out is this: we saw this Bernie bro narrative in 2016. As reporters have pointed out, a lot of those story pitches came from the Hillary Clinton campaign. But also in 2008, we saw the exact same thing tried against Obama. The alleged Obama bros, if you remember that story from Salon in 2008, it's this same narrative where they're trying to just paint the supporters of populist progressive candidates as, misogynistic, harassing online bros. Yeah. And, in this instance, it completely erases the diverse coalition of Bernie Sanders supporters. It is a whitewashing of a diverse supporter base.
You know what? Just to get out ahead of the curve, I'm gonna have a T-shirt made that says "Future Ocasio Bro," because it's gonna happen.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
God. Okay, Jordan, as always, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
For more political news, breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedamagereport. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.